because it didn't feel like a real thing to do. It was a way of maybe hiding from the reality of what I should be doing.
The mind is such a powerful thing where it can just knock your confidence and make you believe that you're not good enough, or you don't deserve to be in a certain position or in a certain job title.
If that's always going to be the thing that you see being a success, it's really hard to not let that control your inner narrative.
You feel like you should know everything about fitness and health and nutrition.
Right.
Okay. I do know a lot about that stuff.
That's helpful.
Do you know that? What's up, guys? Welcome to The Middle Ground, and I'm your host, Rhys White.
And I'm Olivier Nicholas, and this is a podcast about how to overcome imposter syndrome.
So, I think the best way to start this episode is maybe talking about what really imposter syndrome is, because I think it's something that we all experience it, but like, what is it essentially?
For me, it's a sense of not belonging in the environment that you're in. So so for me, growing up, I always felt as though my family were very academic. Even though my dad didn't actually finish school, I always saw him as this kind of highly academic, highly intelligent. Me, I still think that, by the way, Dad.
Yeah. Saved yourself, huh?
Yeah. But I think what happens there is, and it's societal things as well, where school that you go to supports this idea of IQ. You know, it's all around intelligence from a kind of a quantifiable standpoint, whereas there isn't ever any focus on emotional intelligence. So I think for me growing up, that idea of having to live up to this standard of intelligence, I suppose, was for me something that I didn't feel like I could live up to.
Yeah.
So when it came to things like school and, you know, what I thought I would do after school, like when it came to, for example, I didn't go to university, probably purely because of that, because of imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Because I didn't feel as though I would be a good fit for somewhere where intellectuals went. So I ended up, you know, kind of going and doing music, and that's when I, you know, went to music college and started the band. And that's when I felt more like I was doing, I didn't feel like an imposter anymore, because I was doing something where the rules weren't the same, you know? So, and it's also that idea of, I think, aligning with who I was as well, because when I was in a corporate job, for example, again, that's where imposter syndrome came back, because for me, that I never felt as though I was intelligent enough to be in this job, and, you know, sooner or later they'd realise that kind of thing. And I think part of that was that it wasn't living I wasn't living in alignment with my values. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So it created that friction, and I think that's where the imposter syndrome kind of crept in. So I think it's only since really coming into coaching that I've felt less like an imposter. I think it always seems to come, for me, it always seems to boil down to academia, anything that's around that sort of space. Yeah, that's where I feel like an imposter, whereas like I feel less like an imposter here.
I could totally relate to that. It's so weird that you said that, because growing up, I've got an older sister. She was always the smartest one, getting really good grades. I struggled a bit in terms of grades. I didn't do terrible, but it was always comparing yourself to, you know, your sister or your sibling and the expectations of your parents. And I got massive imposter syndrome when I went to university, because I don't think I particularly wanted to go to university. I just, it felt like I had to.
Yeah.
That was like the path that you had to take at the time. And did I want to become an engineer? No, I just did it because, you know, I was okay at maths, and I think there was an expectation for me to go to university. And when I did it, it was so hard. It was like really hard. And I had imposter syndrome there because I was just like, I don't really know what I'm doing here. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I'm hanging around with all these people who are super smart, and I'm really struggling to get by. And I was like, what am I actually doing here? Is this even what I want? And I think that's a valuable thing for me to learn, because I feel like, you know, now I've got Luca. When he grows up, I wouldn't want to force him down a certain route that I felt was best for him. I kind of want him to find his identity and discover what he's comfortable with, and what his values are, and what journey he wants to go. If he wants to go to university, great, we'll support that. If not, then that's okay as well. But I felt I definitely can relate to you that there was definitely some sort of pressure in you going down, you know, the university route and getting a good job after that, and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And I think that's also where imposter syndrome comes from, because you kind of get caught in that cycle. But it's funny that you said you also felt like when you became a coach, you didn't have imposter syndrome then. But I felt like I did when I first became a fitness coach, because I don't know, you've done the course, right, to become a PT. It's very simple, isn't it? Like once you qualify, the things that you learn are very basic. And then when you're chucked in and someone's paying you 60 odd quid an hour for you to train them, at first I was just like, do I even know what I'm doing? Do you know what I mean? Like, at first I'm just like, okay, like, I'm very new to this. This is my first client. I had a bit, that kind of brought up a bit of imposter syndrome due to the lack of experience. Yeah. But then that gradually fades away the longer I did it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would kind of caveat my point around not having imposter syndrome when I became a coach with just, I think, with the business side of things, because when I started the business, then I definitely had, and I probably still do to some degree. You know, I mean, I was fortunate enough that, and still am fortunate enough that my parents always supported anything that I did. So if they realised that I wasn't interested in, you know, kind of academia. Yeah. I think they probably thought I wasn't interested in it, but I think really the reality was I didn't think I was good enough for it. And I sort of slid into music, which felt like a kind of, I don't know, how would I put it? Hiding from reality almost. Yeah. Because it didn't feel like a real thing to do. It was a way of maybe hiding from the reality of what I should be doing, which is going to university and getting a job. So I think it was a way of blocking that out, maybe. So I pursued the kind of creative route, and as I say, I was lucky enough that my parents were incredibly supportive over that. But the idea around the imposter syndrome surrounding like academia, I do think that I put a lot of that on myself. You know, I think it was the inner narrative that I'd created. Okay. Do you know what I mean? Because it's like, no one. I wasn't ever told, oh, you're stupid or whatever. I certainly wasn't told that by my parents, or my brother. That would have been a bit of a weird way to bring your kid up. But I'd put that on myself, and I think I still do to some degree. I put that on myself, and I had this inner narrative going on that meant I couldn't do that, so I may as well do this, which again felt like a kind of a hiding away from reality, going down the music route, because it, unless you're very fortunate, making a lifetime's career out of it's very difficult, So I didn't see it as being a realistic thing that would happen. It felt like a temporary hiding.
Do you feel like that falls under perfection? Like, yeah,
absolutely.
You need to be smart, intelligent, and know everything in order to go to university or, you know, get a certain job, kind of thing. And I do think that's what it comes down to. And you could probably relate to this more, but I've got a lot of friends who are in very well paid jobs, but they have massive imposter syndrome because they never feel like they're doing enough, or they're doing a good enough job, or they don't feel like they're worthy to be in that position. Kind of thing. And again, it's like what we said in the last episode. It's your mind telling you these things, that you're not good enough. Do you know what I mean? And that could be based on past experiences, like me and you just said. But it's a weird one. I think that the mind is such a powerful thing where it can just knock your confidence and make you believe that you're not good enough, or you don't deserve to be in a certain position or in a certain job title. But again, I think, you know, my mates that I'm kind of referring to, they've kind of almost gone up that ladder and been pushed to that point where, you know, they're in that job position and they're kind of like, you know, do I even deserve to be here?
It's funny, isn't it? Because we can have all the evidence in the world to say that we are deserving of a position or whatever, but the mind is such a powerful thing that it can have the ability to knock you off center. And as I mentioned, you know, for me, imposter syndrome was quite big going into starting a business, mainly because I'd never done it before. So I didn't really have the evidence to say that I could do it. So what I tried to use as my kind of compass, I suppose, is trying to think about things that I had achieved that I didn't think I could achieve. You know what I mean? So, you know, for example, I didn't think that I would have been disciplined enough to get into shape after I put on a ton of weight. I didn't think that after I got jumped in London, and it was a really difficult time for me, I didn't think I was ever really going to feel like myself again, but I built up quite a lot of resilience by doing that. So what I try to do is to try and draw upon these things. So for example, starting your own business is not something that can be done overnight. It's not something that can be done without stress, without a fuck ton of work and all this sort of stuff. So it's like, you need to be resilient through all of that, right? And if you're not, then you need to find a way to be resilient, I guess.
Is it fair to say that, you know, stress, imposter syndrome, things like that, it never really goes away, but you just get better at dealing with it?
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't think anyone in the world will do things with no stress at all, or doubt themselves in any sort of way. But I think once you come at peace with a few things, and in your mind that you deserve to be in this position, you deserve to run a business and, you know, give it a good crack. Like, whatever comes after that happens, you get the anxiety again, but you get better at dealing with it because you've dealt with it before and you didn't let it overcome you, and it didn't overtake you and stop you from doing what you wanted to do. And with people that you deal with, because I imagine you deal with people who are in really, you know, well-paid jobs where the expectation and stress is quite high, and there's a high element of imposter syndrome there. What are the kind of steps that you give them to help them deal with that?
It's really about understanding your relationship with imposter syndrome. So, using the example of if someone feels as though let's say they have to address the board for the first time or something, and they've never done that before, And I don't like to use the term like fake it till you make it, because I believe that you should always be living in alignment with your values, and therefore living a true reality of yourself.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't be faking anything. But I do believe that, you know, in this example, you need to lean into it, even if it feels a little bit contrary to what you want to do. So, you know, because the reality is, what's the worst that could happen, right? You know, what's worst case scenario? Like, okay, so maybe you say something not quite as eloquently as maybe you wanted to say, but you just go into it thinking that whatever that worst case scenario is, it's never going to be as bad as what you think, like how you're feeling right now. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a bit like doing this podcast, right? You know, I must admit that before we started, I felt a little bit like that.
Same.
Do you know what I mean? Like, who's going to want to, I mean, maybe no one's listening, who knows?
We've got a few subscribers last time I checked, but no, I totally know what you mean. And again, I think it's all about the scenarios that your mind creates in your head, that no one's going to listen to this podcast. I'm going to stutter my words. I'm going to say something that doesn't quite make sense, or I'm waffling on a bit. No one's going to watch this. Do you know what I mean? But actually, I don't know about you. Since doing this podcast, I've really enjoyed it. It's actually been a lot of fun, right?
Definitely.
But again, I suppose it's letting go of the made up scenario of how you think something's going to go.
Exactly.
And say to yourself, that's not reality. You don't know what the outcome of it is. Going to be. Yeah. But there's only one way to find out.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? But do you I feel like it's quite important to dive into past experiences as well, because I think that can explain a lot about why people feel a certain way, or why people do have imposter syndrome, right? Just like me and you, you said it was all about, you know, education and not thinking you were smart enough, and that's something I could really relate to in terms of my childhood. I do know someone who his imposter syndrome kind of happened, and this came out during therapy, that when he first came out of university, he got a good kind of graduate's job. And you know, graduate jobs can be quite brutal, where you're competing against other graduates and you have to try and impress people. And someone got let go. Like, it was quite like, you know, bit random, you know, they just kind of sacked someone, and he thought that person was better than him
right
at his job, but they just kind of like let go of her like nothing. And then since then, that's always been a thing that, like, right, I've got to work harder to impress. I've got to do all of this and show that I'm worthy to be in that position. So even though everyone has it to a certain extent, it must narrow down to something that's happened in the past.
For sure.
Do you know what I mean? It might not be as obvious as that. It might be very subtle, and people might not even know what that is yet. But it all comes down from something that's happened previously.
Yeah, and like you say, to your point, like, you might not even know what that is. I still genuinely believe that society has a lot to answer for in that as well, but in that narrative, because, again, going back to the example, you know, growing up in kind of boomer culture, where you saw success as this, for me it felt unattainable, but it was this, there was a kind of the guy with the suit and the briefcase, you know, and that was success, because that, you know, and that's quite telling as well, that it's a guy with a briefcase and not a woman with a briefcase, right? So that's obviously thankfully starting to change as well, that we don't see success as just being a male thing. But I think if that's always going to be the thing that you see being a success, it's really hard to not let that control your inner narrative. Do you know what I mean? Or at least for me anyway, I felt as though it was calling the shots for my inner narrative, and then I was just catastrophizing the more. Do you see what I mean? So it just snowballs, and that's where you end up with this kind of not, I don't want to say like firefighting, but in a sense you sort of are a little bit, because when you were saying how you can't just fix imposter syndrome, you can manage it, right?
Yeah. Which
is why I suppose it's a sense in a kind of a firefighting situation. But I mean that sounds a bit too dramatic, but do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think the one thing that's helped me, especially like as a coach, because you feel like you should know everything about fitness and health and nutrition.
Right.
Okay. I do know a lot about that stuff.
That's helpful.
Do you know that? I know what I'm doing, guys. One thing that I do think it was a kind of a sense of imposter syndrome is that, like, when someone asked me a question and I didn't know the answer to it, I would almost just like give them an answer, even though I didn't know the answer to it. Do you know what I mean? But like, because I'm like, I'm a coach, I'm their coach, I should know this.
Yeah.
And that's me setting the standards too high for myself. And it's okay not to know things, but you know what's made a massive difference is like when someone asks me a question and I'm not sure about it, or actually it's something I've never heard of before. You do get the most random questions sometimes. It's me going back to them saying, you know what? That's an interesting question. I don't have an answer for you yet, but let me look into it and I'll come back to you.
Yeah.
I think people will have way more respect for you doing that, and it relieves so much pressure off me.
Yeah.
Because I'm just like, look, I don't actually know, but I'll look into it for you and I'll come back to you. Rather than making up something that could bite you in the arse, because they'll be like, wait a minute, you told me this, but really it's that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's almost admitting that I don't know every single thing in my, every single thing in my profession. Do you know what I mean?
I love that. I mean, can I ask, like, when was it that you made that adjustment in terms of the way that you thought that? Because I mean, I that resonates massively with me, and I think for me, it's probably comes from this propensity to overcompensate for things, and that's why I would have done that. And I'm curious to know, given that you have done that yourself, like what was the, not light bulb moment, but what was the switch?
I think I was talking to a fellow coach about it, and he was almost like, have a bit of respect for your client. If you don't know something, just you don't need to have all the answers. Just tell them that you just don't know, and it makes the situation so much easier. If you do make up something, you can make the situation worse. So it's almost like giving in that you're not perfect. Yeah, there are things that you need to learn. I'm always doing courses to improve my knowledge on nutrition or movements, strength training, all that kind of stuff. I don't know everything. Yeah, and there's always stuff out there to learn, but I think it's letting go of you being a perfectionist, and once you do, I think that makes things a lot easier. And you could do that based on people at work. Like, there's nothing wrong to. This is another example of it. There's nothing wrong to saying to someone, "Look, I'm doing this task. I'm struggling here. Like, can you help me out?" Or, do you know someone who could do a better job for me? Or do you know what I mean? Like, admitting that you are
fallible.
Yeah, and you're struggling to do something, or you don't know how to do this task. Is there someone else who could do it better? I think that's rather than thinking about, I'm in this job position, I need to do it perfectly, I need to know everything. God, I don't know what I'm doing. It just creates such a worse situation for you. But also admitting just that you don't know everything. And that's okay.
But people don't want to ask for help, right? It's I don't know if it's a male thing or if it's it's broader than that, but that willingness to ask for help can sometimes be quite like a tricky thing to switch over into.
People see it as a sign of weakness.
Yeah, exactly. But it's not, though, is it? Like, if you think about, okay, so trying to think of it. So, for example, Tony Robbins has like 7 coaches, for example. Anyone would look at someone of his level and wonder why the hell he would ever need any help, you know. But it's not about asking for help to fix something that's innately in you. It's asking for help to be a better version of yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because I think once you ask for help on something that you're not maybe 100% confident on, then you're only going to learn from that. You'll find someone who knows how to do that task better, or it's kind of like it's like when I wanted to improve my knowledge of nutrition, I found a coach who helps coaches enhance their nutrition, and I was just asking him all the questions, and I told him things I didn't know. Do you know what I mean? And because of that, I learned. Because I was asking him questions, didn't matter how stupid they were. And because of that, I improved, and now I could deal with situations with my clients a little bit better. But again, I think this, it all relates to being a perfectionist and maybe the all or nothing mindset. Do you know what I mean? But there's nothing wrong to ask for help. And maybe this is something I need to improve on as well, is asking for help when I'm struggling on something, or, you know, is there someone that I know who is actually good at this? Maybe someone, you know, maybe when I was editing videos for my content, I was just trying to figure it out by myself, but was I better off going to a mate who's a film editor, right, and asking for help from him? That might have been an easier process than me trying to figure it out myself. Do you know what I mean? Like, it could really translate in everything. But I think with imposter syndrome in your job, and again, we mentioned this, is more about letting go. That you're not going to know everything. There's going to be some things that you need help with,
and you can't predict, and
that's okay.
Do you know
what I mean? I think once you come to terms with that, it will make life so much easier for you.
As well, you know, we put so much pressure on the uncontrollables. Do you know what I mean? So we get in our heads about, and I do this, you know, fixate on the things that we can't control. So the outcome of a situation we can't control. What we can control is how we go into that situation and how we react to things that happen. So, you know, in imposter syndrome, we can't use, let's go back to the board meeting example. You can't predict how that's going to go. So you can't control that. So why don't we focus on having control over what we can control, which is going in as the best version of ourselves and being ready for challenges that come up, in the sense not being like knowing what those are, but being accepting that challenges might come up and that we might need to react.
Do you think another thing for imposter syndrome is comparing yourself to other people?
Oh, 100%. And social media is the worst for that. So
for me, it's like comparing myself to online coaches who have 40,000 followers. I'm just like, how the hell do they do that? Or they get better results, or they seem to know more than me, or they seem to have it together. That you know, they've got loads of clients and they're smashing it, and you're kind of comparing it to you, and you're kind of like, why is that not happening for me? Do you know what I mean? And I think it is comparing yourself to maybe someone in a same position as you in a job, or you see people that you look up to and how far they are up the pedestal. But what you got to realise is that actually those people are probably dealing with imposter syndrome themselves and stress themselves. Do you know what I mean? And it's kind of like when, similar to fitness, when people look at other people who are in great shape, they're kind of comparing their bodies to them, and they're like, oh, I don't like how I look, and you know, they have anxiety of their body image. But the people who are also in shape, believe it or not, have insecurities of their own on their body. And it might be like, my arms are not big enough. Do you know what I mean? Or like, for me, growing up, I always thought my legs were too big. Like, they're just naturally big, through genes. And I was always trying to fight that. It was always something I was playing in my mind. So it doesn't matter who you're comparing yourself to, or how great they're looking, or how under control they've got it, I guarantee you they're going through exactly the same thing as well. We're all trying to figure it out.
Yeah, and you're also trying to score a goal in a moving goal, right? Because there's always going to be, like, at whatever level you get to, there's always going to be someone doing more or better or bigger or whatever, you know. So you're never going to, you're trying to, it's a bit like the kind of the carrot dangling over, you know, the donkey or whatever, or the horse, whatever the example is.
Unicorn, whatever.
But you're trying to get the carrot, but you're never going to get the carrot.
But no, it's like what you said, you're moving the goalpost.
Exactly.
But you don't actually, we don't give ourselves a chance to actually score the goal.
Right.
And go, I scored a fucking goal. I've reached this milestone.
Yeah.
It's always we get close to that goal, and then we're like, oh, what more can I do, and push it further.
Yeah.
So we're never satisfied in what we do, or we never appreciate what, you know, in the position that we're in, because we're just constantly needing more. We need more. We need to prove ourselves or do things better. But actually, and again, this probably does help with imposter syndrome, is reflecting back and you know, at how far you've come, what you've achieved, all the promotions you got.
Yeah.
If I compare myself as a coach now in comparison to when I just qualified and I had my first PT client, the way I trained that person was awful. Like, I didn't,
sorry if you're listening.
Yeah, sorry. So yeah, you know, I'll give you a refund. But no, it's just like, starting out as a coach, I was doing things and trying things out, and yes, I made mistakes, and the way I train people now is nowhere near, it's completely different to how I train people as I just qualified as a PT, because I've learned, and I've you know, I've educated myself in you know, in a few areas, and I have become a better coach over time. But so comparing myself to where I am now as a coach in comparison to where I started, I'm just like, it's a massive gap, and I should be proud of myself.
Are you?
Yeah, I think that caught me off guard. I was like, no, I am proud, but again, I feel like I am capable of more.
Yeah, and that's fine too.
Yeah, no, 100%. But I do appreciate how far I've come, and I'm never not satisfied. But that does creep in sometimes.
And like you say, it's something that you just have to manage, right?
Yeah.
So if anyone is listening to this and struggling with imposter syndrome, hopefully that's given you some stuff to think about. And I think particularly for, as we were saying, you know, it might not be something that ever goes away. It might just be something that you need to figure out a way of managing a little better.
So I suppose, to kind of sum it up, own your success, appreciate progress, and also, it's okay to not know everything and ask for help.
Yeah.
We're all in the same position.
And if you want to fix imposter syndrome, just hit that subscribe button.
100%. just hit it. And yeah. And I'm sorry for my first PT client.
Cheers, guys. See you next time.